like this episode, please subscribe, share with others, rate and review so we can continue to bring you great programming.
This is The Thing About Cars, a podcast for car enthusiasts and the people who love them.
I have FIA news today.
Say what, Misty?
I have FIA news today.
Excellent. We got a full agenda. Hello, this is The Thing About Cars. I'm Mickey Desai. Around the table, we've got all the way in the Netherlands, as always, Misty. How are you, Misty?
Not moist, unlike Spa.
Tim, how goes it, Tim?
Fantastic, although I am a bit damp.
You're a bit damp?
Damp, yes.
Oh, okay.
Had to do some cleanup outside.
I was going to say, it's not raining here in Atlanta today.
No, it's a self-induced dampness.
Self-induced dampness. I like that. Ben, how are you, sir?
Oh, well, wonderfully dry, but I imagine I'll be getting sweaty later when I haul all my gear down to band practice.
Ah, yes. I'm going to attempt to change a headlight bulb today, which normally isn't a big deal, except in this car it requires taking out the battery. So I have to disconnect the entire battery and hope I can still get my large hand, into that tiny space to get that stupid bulb out. So that
sounds like a car I used to have.
Yeah.
I have staff for that.
We have a trivia question that Tim gave us last week that we ended up not using. Tim, I apologize. Would you like to read that one, or shall I do that one?
Yeah, I got it. Okay. What is the name of the American truck company that was, my page jumped, that manufactured its first truck in 1907 and was purchased by Volvo in the year 2000? Okay. American Truck Company first manufactured a truck in 1907, purchased by Volvo in 2000. Our choices are Freightliner, International, Mack, or Peterbilt.
Okay, we will answer that at the end of the show. I confess I've already read it, so I'm disqualified. Let's jump right in. There's a couple things I wanted to get at here, and the first is Ben read this article about Saab. What did I see, Ben?
If you're talking about the thing I put on our top secret Facebook group today, well, it's not it's sort of Saab. I was disappointed to learn that there are no Saabs going back into production. Maybe if I, win one of those $1 billion Powerballs or something, maybe I'll put Saab or Studebaker or somebody back in business. More likely Studebaker. But what it amounted to was it's a Chinese-made EV. Of course, all the hippest EVs now seem to be coming out of China, but this is a company that, through some machinations, wound up with the remnants of the last project that Saab did. Just before they folded, they were working on an EV prototype. And so the Saab engineers, they'd been acquired by another company and then eventually by the Chinese. And so they just kind of kept doing what they were doing. They kept working on this EV prototype. And then a company called Protean got involved. And these guys are kind of pioneering that's the best way to put it, the hub motor concept, putting the motors in the wheels of the electric vehicles instead of a central motor with distributed power. Of course, as soon as I heard about hub motors, I thought, well, gee, the unsprung weight has got to be atrocious. That's the enemy of good handling. But these guys have apparently figured out some ways around that. So, all I saw was a 13-minute Top Gear video about this car. It's a prototype. They call it the Emily. You can still see some of the old Saab lines in it, but they loved it. And I thought, wow, that looks really, really cool. I'd like to drive one of those. But it'll be interesting to see what develops from this. I've heard people talking about motors in the wheels with EVs for years, but this one seems to be one of the first ones that really does it, and apparently does it pretty successfully.
Witchcraft.
Yeah.
Right.
So do you know what the secret is, Ben?
I just told you.
Well, it's a combination of things. Part of it is torque vectoring, which makes the individual wheels behave under power in different ways that makes up for what would be some horrible side effects of the mass at the corners.
Sure.
But also I believe there's a little bit of software magic going on there. But the thing that the guy from Protean said that I thought was interesting was that what they figured out was that it's not necessarily the total mass at each unsprung unit as much as the ratio of the unsprung mass to the vehicle's overall mass. And since EVs are pretty heavy, then you can get away with a little more unsprung mass at the corners.
Sure.
Yeah.
Are we allowed to say unsprung unit in this show?
You can I'm okay with it if you're okay with it.
I don't think we just did. I mean,
Yeah,
I'll let
yeah.
it I have this horrible vision in my head of, one motor deciding to go forward and the other motor deciding to go backwards at the same time, and the car just kind of like, splitting in two.
Right.
Right. Or I'm thinking of when you hit a pothole, one of those really big, bad potholes that can damage a wheel. Now, are you also damaging your motor?
Well, that's
Yeah.
one of the things they talked about, because this is not just something they cooked up and said, here, let's run with it. They did some pretty rigorous testing, including outfitting some Land Rovers with it and bouncing them and thrashing them around through the mud and just really going to hell with them. They described one test where they spin the motor up to a pretty good speed and then dunk it in ice water something like 40 times at its full operating temperature. So yeah, they're putting in the durability testing for this. And so far, so good.
Okay. Looks promising. Let's keep our eyes and ears peeled. Misty, what's going on in F1 world?
Oh, well, it's not just F1.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like the whole FIA this week. This week was definitely a smorgasbord of amazing cars. We had F3, we had F2, we had F1. F1 was also a sprint format, which is pretty new for F1, and it all took place in Spa. Now, Spa is one of the historic tracks. It's also probably one of the most dangerous tracks. It was a couple of months ago that we lost a very young, talented driver to Spa because in Spa it rains.
Sure.
I mean, they've tried the race in August. They've tried the race in July. I mean, they could try the race in. I don't think it would matter which day they picked. It's gonna rain. So there was yesterday in the sprint race for F2, we had a first-time winner, Enzo Fittipaldi, who is the grandson of Emerson Fittipaldi. And on his way to Parc Ferme, I regret to inform everyone that Phil the Bollard was a casualty because he was confused. But that was the only mistake he made, up to that point for the whole weekend.
Poor Phil.
Yeah. And even the announcers had a good laugh about that, although they didn't name Phil by name because we haven't informed them yet. And then today in F3, we had a milestone.
Oh, we did.
We had the first female driver to score points in F3. Sophia Flores finished in P7.
Nice.
And I think she gained 18 places.
Wow.
But that was not the most places gained. I believe the most places gained was 21, but I can't remember who it was.
Okay.
Yeah, might have been Teo Pourchaire.
Okay. And for those of you who might not know who Sophia Flores is, if you've ever seen the video from about 5 years ago from the Macau Grand Prix of a Formula 3 car at the end of a straightaway, touching wheels with another car and then flying up over the Kench fencing into a photographer's stand. And that was her doing the flying and landing. Fortunately, there were no photographers in the photographer's stand at the time. Right. And she escaped with, relatively minor injuries.
Yeah, she's a very talented young German driver. And throwing back to last week's recording, they had Jamie Chadwick today on the on the broadcast. But yeah, Spa was definitely interesting. There were rain delays, a rain delay. Max Verstappen's engineer got a little cheeky with him after Max got cheeky with him back. So that was there was some passive aggressive going on, but it was rather humorous. So yeah, it was definitely an interesting weekend. But I was just, I was literally sitting here this morning trying not to cheer too loud because everyone still wasn't up, But to see Sophia come from, way back in 20th something place all the way up to P7, and she was able to score a total of 6 points, and is now the first female driver to have scored points in Formula 3.
Yeah, that's impressive.
Very exciting. Very exciting.
Yeah, I thought that was really awesome, especially coming on the tail end of the conversation last week with Loxley.
Well, and not only that, but you shared this other thing. What did Danica Patrick have to say about women in science or something? What was this
It wasn't
nonsense?
women in science. It was women in racing. Something about how, I mean, I don't remember the exact quote, and I really don't care to because I'm extremely disappointed, because Danica is definitely a premier driver in NASCAR and Indy,
Right.
and actually holds a few records. I think she's like one of like only 14 drivers to have led both the Indy 500 and the Daytona or something. It's off the top of my head. I can't, don't always remember everything.
Yeah, that sounds
Um,
right.
and she was last week they were doing like the F1 kids. So they had three young people, um, uh, two young men and a young woman who were absolutely amazing. I was like, can we just keep these and like, get rid of like Damon Hill, please? Um,
Yeah.
and she was apparently talking with one of the with the young woman, and they were talking about women in racing, and she made some remark to the effect of, racing is just really an aggressive sport, and that's just not a very feminine mindset.
Hmm.
And
Which is
I was
really
like,
poor choice of words at
yeah,
best.
Yeah.
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
because my first thought was, have you met me?
Right.
I'm like, and but then to say that, especially on international TV as a women driver, as a woman driver, are you saying that you're not feminine, or are you saying that,
Or
you know,
she thought she lacked the aggressiveness to be a consistent top place finisher.
yeah, I mean, so either way, you're kind of shooting all of us, in the back. And I was just really, really disappointed. And yeah, kind of confused,
Yeah.
because I'm
Yeah.
sitting here going, why would you say that?
Well, let's hope that she doesn't make a habit of that, and we hope that women in particular don't have to agree with her. So
Right.
Yeah,
anyway, yeah.
because I've really been enjoying watching, because every few races that they'll actually on Sky Sports especially, they'll actually show the F1 Academy, which is all young women drivers.
Hmm.
And you talk about competitive. I
Sure.
mean, these young women are out there, and they are just, I mean, they are fighting for it. And I think the F1 Academy is driving in F3 cars, aren't they?
I believe so.
I
No,
think it
I don't know
is.
if they're frontline F3 cars. They might be F3 regional, which might have
Yeah.
some like kind of what Formula W had done before, but I'm
Yeah.
not 100% sure.
But still, I mean, these are young women that are out there and just really, blood, sweat, and tears getting these cars down the track and doing an amazing job.
Yeah.
So, so yeah,
All
that's
right.
yeah, it's kind of disappointing, and maybe as soon as I find a spare minute where I'm actually quite sure if if I need to scratch my watch or wind my ass, I'm sure I will approach Danica on social media and go, excuse me, I'm
This
sorry,
is
what?
wrong. Yeah, this is wrong. Let us know how that goes. I would be curious to see if you actually do it and if she actually responds. So definitely
Probably
mention
not.
us. Tell her we talked about her on this episode.
Yeah, I will.
Um,
I will.
Ben and I had a note from a good friend of ours, Robert Drake, who had an incident recently. And Robert's been on the show before to talk about a couple of minor car things, but this time his car died while he was away from home. Um, Still in the same city, but AAA, he is a AAA member. AAA says that, well, the long story short is he originally called AAA around 12:30 in the morning, so 12:30 a.m., and they didn't come get him until after 7 a.m. So he was stuck there all night, which I'm like, first of all, okay, if you're stuck somewhere, call me.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. But the questions he's got here is AAA at one point actually suggested he call a private towing company, and the private towing company took his money apparently via credit card transaction. I'm not sure which, and then declined to tow him for reasons I don't understand. So he's going to challenge those charges if they actually appear on his credit card. But in the meantime, AAA promised repeated times, and they kept on delaying. So Robert's question is, why can't AAA get their act together and provide towing in a reasonable time? Is there such a shortage of tow truck drivers that we should all be in that business? So I'm like, I've always wanted a flatbed tow truck for no good reason at all. Maybe this is a good reason.
You just want to reenact Repo Man.
It's true.
Okay. Not wrong.
Let's go get sushi and not pay.
Yeah, Yeah, in our business, we often deal with companies that haul different type vehicles in different manners, whether it be in the big semi-pull car haulers or individual tow companies, and they're always the sketchiest of ones to deal with. I will say.
Really?
Yes.
Tow truck drivers are sketchy? Companies are sketchy.
A little bit of both. Yeah.
I'm a little surprised. I mean, I shouldn't be, having dealt with a sketchy tow truck company, but the others I've met seemed like pretty much on the up and up. They wanted to provide a service, they did. I paid for it. End of story.
Right.
And but I'm a little surprised that they're generally more sketchy than not. Or
yeah, I would say that it's sort of like there's 50% of them are awesome, and then there's the other 50%. There's a big downward slope where they just tend to be, I don't know, they kind of fly by night and just bad about paying bills and not understanding terms of service agreements, and apparently as your friend was dealt with, not properly understanding their terms of service and whether or not they're going to be able to complete a task.
But don't you think that's probably true for any kind of service area where people tend to panic? Like your car's broken down, the key broke off in your lock, your air conditioning died. Thinking of you, Dave. Miss you. Seriously.
Yeah.
Or your dishwasher's broken, your washing machine is leaking, your toilet's clogged, anything like that where there's this sense of urgency. You have some people, you have, I would say, half or more of the people that are in it because they want to make a difference, because they like what they do, except for maybe the plumbers. And then the other half are just in it because they know they can charge big bucks. They know they can charge you 150 insert currency here, just for crawling out of bed or just for showing up.
Right.
And if you don't like their service, tough crap, you've already paid their 150 insert currency here. So you can go call somebody else and pay another 150 insert currency here.
Right. And, to be fair, the service that we provide to these tow truck drivers or any kind of car hauler companies is in the same vein where, yes, where you get paid upwards of $150 just to show up. And, there's always a process of going through, here's our terms of service. Here's the condition that your equipment needs to be in order for us to work on it. And, if you, think that for some reason don't make that proper, allowance or understanding of your own equipment, you have to charge us for showing up. It's because, you called us and it turns out you have an electrical problem and not a problem that our company deals with, because you don't understand your equipment. You called the wrong people. But, as far as a tow truck company not being able to tow a vehicle, a lot of times, when I think of that, like on my previous cars, I had an aftermarket air dam that blocked the access to the tow hooks. And, you can't haul a car up onto a flatbed trailer unless you can access those tow hooks, or you're going to damage the bodywork somewhere on the vehicle. So it becomes a little tricky at a point like that.
Yes, I guess that's the question, Mickey. Did your friend have aftermarket bodywork that caused the issue?
On that car, no. And with that driver, Robert, no. Robert's probably the last person in the world to do anything aftermarket to any of his cars.
It's like he doesn't even put like a bumper sticker on it.
Okay, a bumper sticker. That would be the limit of his adventure modifications. Yes. In fact, I think he has conspicuity tape on the back of his car, and that's pretty much it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Wow.
A little reflective white and orange thing or white and red thing that goes across the back of his car. But so, yeah, I don't know. And I don't know what AAA's got in mind. I know AAA has always had a series of delays. Maybe that night was a particularly bad night for AAA. Maybe they were short-staffed on drivers, but it does sort of raise the question. Every time that I've called AAA, there's always been roughly a 90 to a 2-hour delay on getting anybody to respond, never mind get a tow. But, so if the demand is that high, is it worth it for AAA to hire another driver or two for this area?
Yeah, but the question is, can they get, because we've all noticed in the US, especially people my age, over the past, I would say 15 to 20 years, there's been the huge shift of, you know, of, you know, get a good job to you have to go to university or you have to go to college to get a good job. And while absolutely nothing wrong with tow truck drivers, and I think, I mean, they're a necessity, just like electricians, just like plumbers. There's probably a shortage, of people that want to drive and B are willing to get called in the middle of the night. Now, as a customer service manager and supervisor, I'm going to sit here and I'm going to literally on air call out AAA for not having the ability to properly communicate lead times. Communicate.
Right.
Yeah.
It makes your life easier. And then you don't have stuff like people talking about, the fact that someone had to wait basically a full work day for a tow, and as well as now having to go back and spend more time disputing credit card charges.
Which is why I'm hoping it's a statistical outlier for Robert's sake or for all of our sakes, because I've called AAA a handful of times. I've never had that kind of a problem with them. Not 7 hours anyway. Certainly a couple here and there, but not 7 hours. That just seems a bit extreme.
Right.
So,
yeah. In the whole world of nut and bolt service personnel, it's a vastly understaffed segment in our workforce. Because when I went to high school, everybody had to be on that college university track, and those of us who, well, I shouldn't say those who weren't on that track were always kind of often looked down upon. But now we're top heavy on people who have college degrees and not a proper avenue in which to use those degrees, and we're short on people who could, with a year or two of training at a technical college, can go out and be making $75,000 to $100,000 in turning nuts and turning wrenches.
I think we're definitely overstaffed with middle management. 100% certainly light on the electricians and the plumbers and the landscape, people that go and do with their hands. And
great.
Have you guys seen any of the Canadian tow truck driver shows that the Weather Channel runs?
No, but I think
they run them like at 10 o'clock to midnight on weeknights or whatever. It's a 2 or 3 or 4 different shows about tow truck operators in Canada, and they sure make it look cool.
Right.
Can you be an unscrupulous Canadian tow truck driver? Is that legal?
That's a good question. Yeah.
That may actually be considered high treason.
Right.
I think
I'm sorry, I can't tow your truck out of that ravine. Really sorry, eh?
Yeah, I'm sorry. I think I saw something similar, and it wasn't necessarily tow truck drivers, it was more recovery drivers, like in Norway.
Oh wow, yeah.
And I think in the episode I saw, it was like a truck that had flipped over, and so they were trying to lift it with the air cushions, and then there was another one to where it was a refrigerated truck that had broke down, and it had meat or something in it, so everybody was coming along to help. They weren't looting the meat, okay, but they were coming to help move it to another smaller truck that had shown up to replace this one that had broken down.
Canadian shows, sorry, didn't mean to cut you off there. The Canadian shows do a lot of that too. There's one I've seen a couple times where this dump truck that weighs something like 40,000 pounds has gone ass end first down almost a vertical cliff, like 200 feet below the road, which is a dirt road up in the mountains. And these guys pulled the thing out, the 2 big giant trucks, and a whole lot of, a lot of drama with, well, is it going to work or is it not going to work, or what was that noise, but they got it out of there.
I might have actually seen that one where it was being held up basically by a tree.
I think so. Yeah, they wound up having to cut a bunch of trees from under it. They had to risk their lives to go underneath to release the air brakes. And then they had a clever plan to use the laid down trees as kind of a ramp to get it over the boulders. And it was really something. I
swear I've seen that one. And I was just sitting there going, wow, because if that had happened in the U.S., there would have been at least one incident of, hey, y'all watch this.
Right.
And probably at least 2 of, hold my beer.
Hold my beer. So I've got this joke just to wrap up this little talk about the Roberts issue, which I'm not really sure we've shed any light on at all. But
I disagree.
Sorry, Robert. Or maybe you're welcome, Robert. I'm not sure which one applies. Um, so this brain surgeon needs a plumber, and he hires a plumber. Plumber comes over to the house, fixes the problem, and presents the bill. Brain surgeon's like, "Holy mackerel! I'm a brain surgeon, and I don't make that kind of money." And the plumber says, "I know. I used to be a brain surgeon."
See, very good point.
So,
very good point.
Yes, there we go. Last thing I want to talk about before we wrap the episode. I'm sorry, Misty.
Oh, no, I was just gonna say, I've actually started to see recently a lot of, it feels like I've seen a lot of stories of people that were like, oh, I was a manager, or oh, I was this high-flying banker or something. And then I just kind of got tired of it and gave it all up to be like a beekeeper. And, now I'm just like immensely happier.
People are getting tired of the BS that comes along with corporate culture in general, I think. And it's not just working, obviously, because people want to work, people need to work, but corporate culture has gotten debunked, if I can say. It's just people recognize the BS that's within, and they're tired of it. And I'm frankly glad to see the change. I'm glad to see people saying, giving the finger to their old workplaces and not putting up with, bad work habits anymore.
I'm really glad that we're starting to push back against the toxicity, which is, that's what it is,
That's right. That's exactly right.
If you hear people say, and I guess for me living here, because I'm literally required to take 20 vacation days minimum a year. Okay, so that's minimum of 4 weeks, and and to hear people say, oh, I haven't had a vacation in like 5 years. I'm like, that ain't quite the flex you think that is, because I'm just
right.
Yeah,
that's exactly right.
And I'm so glad to see people pushing back against that, because that work-life balance, it is just so important, and I can definitely say that I am in a much better place mentally, than I ever was working in the US.
Yeah, the U.S. has some real reckoning to have happen amongst the corporate world, and there's a lot of growing discontent, and I hope it continues to blow up and burn.
Yes,
frankly, because we need changes.
Americans, we are now calling upon you to become bollards.
Just hope we don't get run over.
That's right.
Yeah,
no one will all benefit.
Did you say you have to watch out for those little short Brazilians?
Yeah.
All right. Last thing before we wrap the episode and answer the trivia question is, I saw this thing on Reddit. I thought it was a pretty decent question. So this person is looking at a replacement axle on Reddit, and he's like, is there any reason why the Duralast version of this axle costs almost 3 times the price of the other one, which is on Rock Auto? And if you look very closely, the pictures of the axles are identical. It is the same part. Right? It is exactly the same part, probably from the same manufacturer even. But the Rock Auto one is almost 1/3 the price of the Duralast one. So the question was, any valid reason why this should be the case? And I think there are decent reasons why, but what do you guys think? 3 times the price.
Yes, the big question for me is the more expensive one a brand new axle, or is it a rebuilt axle? And a lot of times people will not take the time to look to see if there is a difference there, because drive axles are rebuildable, but depending on the method in which they're rebuilt, there's a quick and cheap method, and then there's the top of the line expensive method, and the longevity you will get under harsh driving conditions will make the more expensive one worth it, and vice versa.
Sure.
And normally I'm like, look, I know like that can of corn, in the grocery store, the store brand.
Wait a minute.
Hold on.
It's an axle and a can of corn.
Can I finish?
I can't wait to hear the connection between
You're
the two.
You're gonna see, because I know that can of corn, there's 2 cans of corn. There's the really expensive, mark, A mark, and then there's the store brand. I know that more than likely those are produced in the same factory, and they're the same thing. But on the other hand, if this store brand can of corn is slightly, not maybe up to the same spec as the A mark, if it kind of like breaks, it's not going to kill me, or we hope.
Right.
Or at least it's not going to sling me down the highway at 75 miles an hour doing, while I'm channeling Simon and Garfunkel, slip sliding away. So I think that's the difference, and it's very seldom that I will say I will buy the brand name, the well-known name over, the store brand or the off-brand mark every single time.
Sure. I mean, the issue
Car
of
parts.
responsibility is still there. Rock Auto still has to be responsible for their stuff. Their manufacturer, whoever Rock Auto gets their stuff from, has a certain amount of responsibility and liability as well.
Well, I think that's where part of this comes in because I'm not sure, Tim made some valid points, but I'm not sure the difference is worth that much. And I think it may have a little bit to do with just the way the two businesses operate because your Duralast part is going to come from an AutoZone or an O'Reilly or somewhere like that. Whereas Rock Auto is a big, giant aggregator that has a very efficient internet-based, business. So
And to answer Tim's earlier point, there's no information here on remanufacturing versus new. So I think for the purposes of our discussion, let's assume they're both new.
Right.
Yeah. And are you talking about exclusively buying online, or are you talking about, I'm looking at this Duralast one in the advanced auto, so I can actually look at it and see if it's maybe a little wonky versus only being able to order it online?
Right.
Because that's another thing too with car parts. I'm still, unless it's just like a lens cover or a steering wheel cover. I mean, if it's a functioning part that is required to keep the car on the road, preferably on the road safely. I mean, I still, call me old. Everybody else does, because I kind of am. But for me, that's one of the ones that I want to go and I want to look at it. Is there something that maybe doesn't feel right about it? Is there this big honking oil stain on the packaging that, instead of trying to order it, get it in, send it back? Ugh.
Well, that's one of the
to Ben's point. Like you said, Rock Auto ships out of maybe 5 to 10 locations across the U.S. So when you buy from them, you're also paying for the shipping to your house or wherever.
Right.
Whereas you buy it at the local auto store, that's already been aggregated into the cost of the item.
Right. Rock Auto does tack on shipping. That is true, especially for something like an axle, which is not a lightweight piece of metal.
But the shipping isn't worth 2/3 of the AutoZone price.
Bingo.
Right. That's true.
So here's one of the better answers that I read here on the Reddit post. This person posits, he says you're paying, or he or she says that you're paying for the 3 times the price for the lifetime warranty, which Rock Auto doesn't give you. Duralast does. The convenience of buying it on the spot and returning it, which is another big piece of it, to Ben's point about the business model of Rock Auto versus AutoZone or whoever sells Duralast. So I think those two things alone are a big piece of the puzzle there. That's why Duralast charges more. They've covered shipping. They're offering you a huge warranty that you don't get with Rock Auto, and you can conveniently return the thing, which you don't get to do with Rock Auto, which requires more hoops to jump through if you want to return something to them.
Not to mention paying return shipping. And I'm sure if Rock Auto offered a warranty, you would pay more, like the total aggregate price after shipping and the extended warranty would be at least level, if not more, than the Duralast model.
Yep.
But that's my opinion.
So anyway, good stuff. So if people need to buy parts, here's the $1,000 question, which may not be answerable based on this conversation. Should I go to the auto parts store and get it, or should I go to Rock Auto and get it?
The answer is, like so many things with vehicles, it depends.
It depends.
Yeah,
right.
It depends. I mean, like I said, are we talking about, maybe a replacement motor for, your driver's side window? One would hope that it wouldn't spin out of control and, go zipping off across. Is it, a fuse? Those I would probably buy online.
Yeah.
Simple stuff that's not going to directly impact the safe handling of the car.
That's my thing. If it's a life and death thing, I'll probably go OEM and preferably in person. And otherwise, if it's not a life and death thing, I'll definitely do the price hunting thing online.
Right. And how soon do you need it? Can you wait 2 or 3 days for shipping?
Right. So, all right. Trivia's our Tim. Please, let's answer the question for today and let's wrap our episode.
Okay. So the question again, what is the name of the American truck company that manufactured its first truck in 1907 and was purchased by Volvo in the year 2000? Is it A, Freightliner, B, International, C, Mack, or D, Peterbilt? So let's see, Ben, what say a few?
I say it'd be Mac.
Okay. Misty?
I'm going to say international because before you even started listing the choices, I went, that sounds like international. I don't know where that came from. It was a light bulb moment, but I'm going to dance with the one that brung me.
Okay. And Mickey, do you remember?
I do remember.
Yeah. So
you want me to give the answer?
Sure.
The answer is, because I had a similar thought as Misty. I'm like, my first thought was international, and I was always taught stick with your first gut answer because most of the time that's correct. But in this case, the answer is Mac.
Right. And Mac had inspired the name of one of the Pixar characters in the movie Cars. So.
Yeah.
So,
nice.
Good stuff. I haven't actually seen a Mac truck, or at least I'm not aware that I've seen a Mac truck on the road in a while.
Have.
I'm sure.
Yeah. They've got modern, slick styling like all the other ones, and I have driven past. I don't know if it's their number one corporate office or just one of the ones, but somewhere in the Carolinas, I've driven past one several times. It's really slick looking place. And the trucks they're making are really cool now. And one of the things I read about them is probably no longer true, but at some point in the 90s, they actually designed their trucks so that chassis and cabs across a span of something like 60 years were interchangeable.
Wow.
That sounds amazing.
You could actually put a 90s cab on a 30s chassis or vice versa if you were crazy enough.
That is crazy. That sounds
I probably actually would have gone the other way, because I want the durability of the 90s model, but I want the really cool retro styling of the 30s.
Right.
Yeah.
See, now that's how I would go.
Yeah, Mac's a pretty cool company.
Trucking itself is huge. I don't, and I didn't realize how huge it is, but it's massive. You tend not to realize it until all of a sudden you're faced with the numbers and you're like, wow, how many billions of dollars are tied up just in getting things from point A to point B, and how much of that involves trucking. So
if you would come to the Netherlands, because that's the history of the Netherlands. The Netherlands at one point in time, and I hate to address this because it's not pretty history necessarily, but at one point in time, the Netherlands was the only country allowed to trade with Japan. Because they're like, look, we don't care about religion. We just want to take your money. They had a global empire that rivaled, England, with, I'm not going to say entirely missing, the violent colonialism, but significantly less.
Right.
Because they were just like, look, we don't care. We just want your money. We just want to bring stuff, and the Port of Rotterdam is, one of the biggest harbors, in Europe.
Right. Yeah.
And it's actually
the Dutch East India Company. Yes.
Yeah. And it's actually not too far from where I work.
We do need to get to the Netherlands. There's so many places we need to go, but we need a sponsor. So if you can sponsor us and we can create some good entertainment out of it, please give me a call.
I wonder if we should court a manufacturer of bollards.
Actually,
that makes more sense than I want it to, Ben. Let's do it.
Yeah. Or let's reach out to Van Amersfoort Racing.
Yeah.
Which is a Dutch team, and let's hey, let's get these Americans over here and show them what racing's actually about. It's not just going around in an oval, people.
That's right.
So
let's make it happen. Let's try to make it happen. Maybe this will be the year.
Yeah, like I said, if y'all fly into Amsterdam, we'll take the train to Paris, and then we've got planes, trains, and at least one automobile in there, because I'm sure we'll take a taxi.
Exactly.
Hopefully the French truckers won't be on strike.
Literally, I think the last time there were protests, I have a friend that lives in Paris, and he was like, "Well, all of my American friends just stop freaking out. Yes, there's protests," and I was like, there's protests in France. Do you know what that means? And a friend of mine was like, it must be spring. Which is pretty accurate. Which is pretty accurate. So yeah, it's but if I want to say, if public transportation in France is on strike, we can always get those little scooters and just be like super cool.
Yeah, I'm gonna need a heavy duty one.
They make those. It's okay. We'll just have to get you one of the old-fashioned Vespas, that's made out of
that would be sweet. That would be awesome. So thanks again to our listening audience for hanging with us for the last 40-something minutes. We really appreciate your time and enthusiasm. If you have suggestions for the show, please find our website, thethingaboutcars.com. And please Join us next week for a brand new episode and probably even more trivia. And maybe Dave will be back from his non-air conditioned. Yeah, he'll fix his air conditioning problems, and maybe Dawn will be here. We'll have the whole gang, I hope. Anyway, be safe, y'all. Stay cool or warm, whatever you prefer. We'll see you again in about a week.
See ya.
Bye now.
Ciao.
Thank you for listening. This has been The Thing About Cars. We'll see you on the road.